We are Southeastern 16. Chase Robinson, Chris Lee here as we cover SEC football, and we want to bring you the latest news, and that involves an unfortunate situation out of Athens, Georgia, as starting wide receiver RaRa Thomas has been dismissed from the team following an arrest on Friday of last week. So we will talk about that and what that means for the Georgia Bulldogs moving forward. But first, let's talk about Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, you can head over to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of the over 150 slots games. Head over to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. So on Friday morning, RaRa Thomas, again, starting wide receiver for the Georgia Bulldogs. He spent a couple of seasons with Mississippi State and has transferred to Georgia, but he was arrested on one count of child cruelty, which is a felony, and two counts of battery, both misdemeanors. All three counts carried a family violence charge. Thomas was released on bond on Tuesday, but this is the first time Kirby Smart has addressed this today in his opening statement of his press conference. He did say that RaRa Thomas has been dismissed from the team there at Georgia. Again, he came via the portal. He spent his first two seasons at Mississippi State. But last year for the Bulldogs, he caught 23 passes for 383 yards and a touchdown. So this is not some guy off the bench deep in the depth chart that Georgia is losing. They are losing a big piece to what they're trying to do in replacing wide receivers.
Yeah, unfortunate situation. Continued I guess some would say, a pattern of off-field trouble for Kirby Smart's program. Won't get into that. Won't get into the specifics of what happened. You can do your own research and make your own conclusions. But yes, a bad spot. But I think what we're going to spend most of our time on is talking about ramifications. Chase, I kind of keep a depth chart that I'll compile from various sources, and you see people all over the place in terms of one guy's X is another guy's Z. But what I had, Thomas looked like he was the starter at the X spot. Colbie Young, the Miami transfer who caught 47 balls for 563 yards and 5 scores a year ago, I had slotted behind him, along with consensus 4-star freshman Nitro Tuggle, who is a top 150 recruit. Now, again, they got parts they can move around. They've got other guys on the depth chart, but presumably, if I read this at face value, which I'm not saying you should, but if you did, I guess Colbie Young, the Miami transfer, who's 6'3", 215, would move up into that starting X spot. There may be some other candidates we'll get into, but that would be my first read.
Yeah, I think so as well. I agree with that. And looking at what Colbie Young did during the spring, he caught 3 passes, 27 yards, and a touchdown in Georgia's spring game. And so I think he is a guy who can immediately step up and make an impact in that position. But kind of the talk in the offseason has been Georgia's kind of redoing the wide receiver room after losing so many to the draft and whatnot, that it's not good to see one guy who you've been expecting to lean on now not on the team. That's a tough spot for Georgia to be in. Even with other guys, you think about it, they were going to depend on RaRa Thomas this year, and he's a great football player, great pass catcher, and now they've just lost that.
Yeah, and the common theme at Georgia too, and no, let's also be fair, Georgia lost Ladd McConkey, who I think was a first rounder, and lost one of the best tight ends to ever play football in Brock Bowers. So already was, hurting is relative. It's Georgia. Come on. But, a couple of big losses there. And now you lose Thomas, who really put up better numbers at Mississippi State than he did at Georgia because of opportunity. But opportunity is what's going to knock for some other guys. I'm looking at Dillion Bell is probably going to be the starter at the Z, a potential all-conference candidate. I'm going to leave the slot guys out of it. I'm going to just leave Dominic Lovvett, Anthony Evans III, and Arian Smith as slot guys as I had them here. I'm not saying that they couldn't move somebody, but the guys behind Bell Michael Jackson III, and London Humphries at Vanderbilt, which you probably didn't know this. London Humphries has the highest per catch average from last year of anybody on the team.
Wow.
And then if you're just going to include any level of college football, he averaged 20 yards a catch at Vanderbilt, sprinter in high school, transferred into Georgia, presumably would be maybe the third guy behind Michael Jackson III, the Southern Cal transfer. But those are guys, too, that could get some opportunity by the benefit of whatever the bump up for everybody is on the depth chart.
Yeah, I mean, let's say Colbie Young is kind of bumped up to that starting role. I could see a guy like London Humphries getting a little more action in, because you mentioned he is a good receiver, and I think is a great addition to Georgia. So you could see maybe him getting some more touches, maybe going behind Young or coming in. Maybe if he was the third spot, on the rotation, well, he gets bumped up, and we're going to see him more. So, I think there's several players that can that they're going to have to step up, but they will get a chance, more of a chance to now with a little more room.
Well, let's face it, Chase. Georgia's not a spot where you're probably going to go and lead the SEC in receiving. And again, that's not a talent thing. It's just you look at their stats sheet for several years now. They are so stocked with 4- and 5-star talents or transfers who maybe weren't that, but proved themselves at that level other places. It feels like their whole stat sheet is littered with guys that rushed or caught passes from between 500 and 700 yards, and they all just kind of blend together. Also, when you're at Georgia, though, those lower level guys get a chance. I mean, Georgia is a team that I'm looking at some numbers I've got in front of me. They could outscore opponents on composite close to 300 points this year, even against a brutal schedule. If you trust computers, the exact number is 282, if anybody cares about that. But point is, there's a lot of playing time for a lot of people, and that's the benefit of Kirby Smart's situation, right? Because they have blown some people out in the past. They've got to play other guys. So when a guy has to step up and take on a bigger role, Chase, he's used to it. It's not like being another place where you've got 4 or 5 dudes in your receiving room who can really play, and everybody else sits and waits while those mouths get fed. That is a benefit to what Kirby Smart has built, is he's got a lot of guys who got to play a lot of ball while Georgia was blowing teams out. I think that is one reason Georgia has just remained on top year after year after year under Kirby Smart.
Yeah, that's a great observation, because I feel like for some teams, if this was the case, having to dismiss a player, well, now they're in trouble because they're down a guy, and they don't have the depth. But that is an excellent point that Georgia has the depth. They have the guys, and they're so deep at so many different positions that they can, and not that you want to lose guys left and right. That's not what I'm saying. But if you do lose a guy, you're okay. Like you're not just dependent on one player. No, there's a handful of guys who can step up, play this position, and be successful at it. So yeah, I certainly agree with that point there, Chris.
Yeah, now all things being equal, I don't think this really affects them a whole lot. I mean, obviously, if he's a starting receiver, that's because you think he's your best guy. Now, the problem becomes, and it would take a lot, right? If you start getting a lot of injuries, if a Bell goes down, if a Lovvett goes down in the slot, if a Humphries goes down, you get 3 or 4 guys hurt. That's where it is going to really affect you. So you start sanding off your depth a little bit. And I think that's what people overlook in the situation. It's not necessarily losing that guy. It's what happens if you lose a couple more. So that's really the place that I'm most concerned about Georgia. But even there, I mean, we just went through 9 names. Not to mention they use their tight ends pretty well. So I think they'll be fine. But if you just want a really outlier situation where you look up and say, hey, Georgia was really in trouble after losing RaRa Thomas, it would be because of a domino effect of losing other guys that you hope would not happen.
Yeah, excellent point there as well. So definitely a tough situation out of Athens, Georgia, with RaRa Thomas being dismissed from the team, as Kirby Smart announced here today. It is August the 1st. He made that mention in his opening statement of his press conference today, as fall camp getting rolling in Athens, Georgia, as it is all across the SEC. Teams getting ready to hit the practice field. And so that's our thoughts as, again, RaRa Thomas dismissed there from Georgia, and what the rest of the wide receiver room looks like there for the Bulldogs. We got you covered all things SEC football here on Southeastern 16. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and we bring you more reaction as things happen across SEC football with all the things that we do as well here on the channel. For Chris Lee, I'm Chase Robinson. We are Southeastern 16.